Dear friends, welcome to the channel The Eastern Front. Today we will dive into the memories of sniper Lyudmila Pavlichenko about the battles for Sevastopol. I will tell you how Lyudmila, by both tragic and happy chance, met her mentor here. Perhaps it was thanks to this meeting that Lyudmila managed to survive in the Crimean forests. The assault on Sevastopol, which lasted 25 days, ended. The invaders managed to push the defenders by 3-4 kilometers in the first sector of defense east of the fishing village of Balaklava and by 1-2 kilometers in the third sector near the villages of Duankoi, Cheke, Crimean and the hamlet of Mekenzia. A relatively peaceful life began on the defense lines, which stretched for the 46 kilometer along the Crimean valleys and mountains overgrown with forest. From the seashore at Balaklava to the Belbek River, the neutral strip with a width of 100-200 meters had the same length, marked on both sides by deep trenches, winding communication passages, machine gun nests, areas with anti-tank ditches, minefields and fences with barbed wire. Often the barbed wire was stretched directly over the trunks of trees in the forest. Completely unnoticed, we snipers, as well as our regimental and divisional scout, could cross it on the Mackenzie Mountains. The same crossings were used by German reconnaissance groups. Having run into our military guards, they usually hurriedly left. So it was this time. The powder smoke was still drifting over the mountains. The echo of the last shots was still rolling over the beams and tracts, when a gray-haired man in a gray civilian jacket and with a knapsack on his shoulders came out of the thicket at the trenches of the 2nd Company. He looked very much like a goblin with his hunched, thin figure and curly beard that almost reached his eyes. From surprise, the soldiers of the sniper platoon almost shot him. He threw up both hands and shouted wildly, "I'm not an enemy!" In his hands he held an open Soviet passport and some kind of certificate, in brown folder and with a purple seal. I lowered my rifle and asked him who he was, what he was doing in the combat positions of the 54th Regiment, and how he managed to get through the enemy patrols. The old man replied that it was not difficult at all, because the Germans don't go far into the forest, they're afraid. And he's a local forester and bypassed them alone inconspicuous path that he alone is familiar with. Then he began to cry, tears rolled down his white beard and began to fall in his jacket, strapped with a hunting bandolier, however unfilled. In the first minutes I was confused. This incident seemed very strange to me, but for some reason Fyodor Sidich immediately believed the old man. He persuaded me to let the forester come to us and listen to his story. Soon, over a hot breakfast delivered to the trenches of the combat guard by the foreman, we discussed the story of the huntsman Anastas Vartanov. It was very tragic, like many other events of this hellish war. A group of fascist intelligence jumped into the forest cordon number 2, ahead of their combat units. They somehow didn't like Vartanov's son, his grandson, and the whole family of the forester. Without thinking twice, the Nazis shot them near the house. Anastas himself, by luck or misfortune, left that day in the morning to the city administration in order to write out invoices and get oats and hay to feed the forest inhabitants in winter. Now, according to the forester, some kind of German headquarters is located on the Mekenzia farm. Near the house, under the trees, there were wheel-tracked armored personnel carriers with antennas and machine guns on the roofs of the cabins. The main guest was a tall man with blue eyes, about 40 years old, with a black and white cross under the collar of the uniform. He lived in the room of the executed Vartanov's son, and every morning he poured water over himself from the well, rubbed himself with a red terry towel, energetically did exercises. I will show you the place, the farm will be visible very well. By the way, it's not far from here. Through the forest, bypassing 5 kilometers, it's just one night's walk from here. Do you want to come with us? I really want to. If I don't see it, I don't need to live in the world. The intention of the old huntsman to punish the enemies for the death of the family was clear to me. The information was confirmed from the headquarters of the Sevastopol defensive area 2 days later. Vartanov was telling the truth. The assistant chief of staff of the regiment for intelligence, Captain Mikhail Bezrodny, approved my plan for a sortie to the Mackenzie farm, on the condition that the huntsman Anastas Vartanov would act as the guide of the group. I went to explore through the forest on the Mackenzie Mountains with the forester. At the same time, I hit another goal. I didn't have much sniper experience in the woods. I didn't know the terrain at all. I wasn't used to firing in the mountains covered with a dense forest, which stands like a green wall and makes noise, under the gust of violent sea wind. Dawn was just breaking. I listened and raised my head. The curiously carved brown-gray trunk of a maple tree, which was called false sycamore, here bent over the path. A few large orange spreading leaves, a little like a human palm, were still held up there on long cuttings. Suddenly, one of them broke away and, spinning in the air, lay down on the path right at my feet. Vartanov pointed at him with his hand. "Take it, this is for good luck." A beautiful maple leaf didn't fit at all with the autumn sniper clothes. A camouflage jacket of a dirty yellow color with the brown streaks. I put it in my pocket, where there was individual first aid package and a piece of refined sugar, carefully wrapped in foil along with a pinch of dry tea leaves. Sugar is chewed with tea leaves, strengthens well during hours-long ambush. I didn't know what kind of ambush was waiting for me now. I just followed the forester along a barely noticeable hunting trail and looked closely at the forest. After the endless and desolate steppes of Odessa, it seemed to me an ideal place for camouflage, but absolutely not ideal for marksmanship. Where the bullet will fly. It's not a rabbit to loop between the trees. How to correctly calculate the distance to the target, with ravines invisible due to overgrown bushes everywhere. "It's 85 meters from the crooked maple tree to the well," the old huntsman said quietly. "Remember, you'll need it, baby." It was as if Anastas had read my thoughts. The whole life of Vartanov and his friendly family took place at the forest cordon number 2 Mackenzie farm. The huntsman worked from dawn to dawn because the forest requires constant care. But he considered himself a happy, lucky man. The house is a full bowl, the eldest son is already helping him. The wife is kind, hard-working, the younger children are always looked after, dressed, shod. What did the Germans dislike so much about his area that November day? Damn them all. From a maple tree with a carved trunk, the path diverged in 2 directions. If it wasn't for Vartanov, I wouldn't even have noticed it turning right. The old huntsman pointed to a tall thicket of bushes and called this plant Holy Tree, or Christ's Thorn. According to the legend, a crown of thorns was woven from its branches for Jesus Christ. It grows mostly in the Mediterranean and North Africa, but it has long taken root in the Crimea. I turned awkwardly, and my sleeve caught on the point of a thorn. It went into the fabric quite deeply. I had to break an entire branch, which made a dry crack in the morning silence sound like an alarm signal. A flock of tits flew up from the nearest acacia tree. Vartanov turned to me. "Be careful, comrade commander." Soon we saw an old water conduit, a rusty pipe about 20 centimeters in diameter. Suddenly, a hoarse sigh came from there. The forester froze in his tracks. I'm not calculating the distance, stumbled upon him. In the well, a black hole in the ground, somehow fenced with large stones and half covered with boards. A wild boar, young, with light brown fur, and with still ungrown fangs landed. He couldn't get out of the trap by himself, although he tried. Seeing us, the forest dweller made a desperate dash, but he couldn't get out. Turning his head, he looked at the forester with dark brown sad eyes and grunted plaintively. "You want to shoot him?" Anastas asked. "Pork cutlets from fresh meat," Isn't that a soldier's joy? No, I answered, curiously looking at the piggy. I like him, he's still small, let him alive. The huntsman cheered up. He picked up a long piece of wood not far from the well, slipped it under the belly of the boar, picked it up, carried it to the ground and lowered it. He jumped to his feet, dusted himself off, and set off at a full speed. I couldn't help laughing. I didn't approve of hunting animals, and I still don't. Forest dwellers seem to me defenseless, and unhappy creatures in front of people armed with rapid-firing rifles. Judging by the map that Captain Bezrodny provided me with, the neutral strip ended behind the well and the territory captured by the Germans began. We sat down to rest and refresh ourselves. Vartanov, who received a Russian, began to tell me about the Crimean forest. The huntsman adored it and knew perfectly, and this knowledge was hereditary, passed down to him from his father. Anastas said that I did the right thing by letting the wild boar go free, and the forest will repay me with kindness. Because in the forest, as in a temple, you need to observe its age-old customs and never kill in vain, for fun. I asked the huntsman if it was easy to find the way in the thicket and not get lost among the trees. Easy, the old man replied. After all, trees are like a people. Every one has its own character. Trees differ in species, age, time of flowering and fruiting. I can see their faces and figures. They are very different. If you want to, you will see it too. It was difficult to take this argument seriously. They were like a fairy tale, a legend, but I didn't interrupt Vartanov. Let him speak, let him teach me the forest life. So far I didn't understand anything and looked at the thick trunks of elms and maples surrounding the well with some confusion. An unfriendly cold morning added gloomy colors to them. I didn't really believe that I would be able to settle down here and read a mysterious forest book. We came to the Mackenzie farm from the northwest side when the sun was rising. To see the place better, I had to climb a tree. For quite a long time I watched through binoculars the measured life of the rear of the German 11th Army. On the road between the farm and the village of Zalenka, German vehicles and people in mouse-colored jackets and overcoats regularly moved back and forth. After lunch, the blue-eyed officer in twisted silver-shouldered straps came out of the house. I've already figured out the enemy uniform. He was an artillery major, awarded the Order of the Knight's Cross, as well as a silver-plated assault badge. The door of the house from which he appeared was 100 meters away from my tree, and exactly opposite it. I marked it on a piece of paper attached to a flat field bag, which was called a fire cart. The major lit a cigar and, together with an orderly holding a folder in his hands, and got into an Opel Capitan passenger car. The car drove along the road. It didn't go to the village of Zalenka, but to the village Crimean. According to our intelligence reports, the headquarters of the 11th Army was located there, and its commander, Colonel General Erich von Manstein, lived there. Probably the major was in a hurry to attend a meeting with his superior, the general. On paper, I depicted the entire forester's estate in a conventional form: a house in the form of a square, a barnyard and sheds in the form of triangles, a country road with a winding thick line, and a barrier on it with 2 dashes. I also marked approximate distance between the objects. Wind in the mountains is almost a constant phenomenon. I noticed that on the trees surrounding the farm, thin branches are deflected, leaves are swaying strongly, white dust is spinning over the road. This means that the wind speed is moderate, 4-6 meters per second. No wonder the sniper proverb says, "A gun shoots, the wind carries bullets." If we choose this position, the wind for us will be lateral, blowing at an angle of 90 degrees. Under similar conditions and at a distance of 100 meters from the target, the sniper's calculation is simple. The horizontal lateral correction will be 3 centimeters. in thousands 0.15. However, there is one more circumstance. When the terrain rises above the sea level, atmospheric pressure changes, air density decreases. In this case, the range of the trajectory and flight of the bullet increases. However, my mentor Potapov wrote in his book that in mountains with a height of less than 500 meters, here the height didn't exceed 310 meters. The longitudinal wind can be neglected, but the lateral one must be taken into account because it causes a significant deviation of the bullet from the firing plane. Descending from the tree, I showed my work to Vartanov. He was very surprised. It didn't make sense to explain everything drawn to the forester, but the huntsman helped with a more accurate calculation of distances. I asked him about the wind and heard the story about how in November and December strong winds blow here from the north and northeast, which bring rain and fog. We decided not to delay with the preparation for the operation, since the data could be outdated. After my report, Captain Bezrodny warned me that in the raid to the Mackenzie farm, I would have to manage the firing of the whole group because there were many newcomers in the platoon. They have not learned the ballistic tables by heart yet. They have not seen Potapov's wonderful book. They don't know all the subtleties of conducting accurate fire in the mountains. Meanwhile, the attack will be sudden, fast, and with it every bullet must hit the target. That is the key to the success of the entire operation. The composition of the group of shooters was determined immediately. Captain Bezrodny gave 2 soldiers from a platoon of foot reconnaissance. They shot from all types of hand weapons, mastered hand-to-hand combat techniques, and more than once went to the Germans in the rear. I didn't know them, but the captain assured me that they were his best people. In regimental intelligence, the best people are usually too independent, and I asked the captain to explain to them that I would not tolerate any nonsense. In the raid, they must obey me implicitly. He did it in his usual ironic manner. Guys, I warn you, Senior Sergeant Lyudmila Pavlichenko is a serious girl and doesn't like jokes. Anything goes wrong and you will get a strike in the leg with a finger knife. By order of Bezrodny, the scouts were given 2 brand new PPSH-41 submachine guns and a DP light machine gun with 3 spare discs. I took with me my award-winning Sveta SVT rifle and other snipers in our group, Mosin rifles with a PE sight. For a long time we thought about how to arm Vartanov. He was able to shoot only from a single-shot rifle of the Berdan system with the longitudinally sliding shutter. Of course, we didn't have these weapons in service, so we provided him with the usual Mosin rifle. In addition to weapons, they took sapper shovels, combat knives or finger knives, flask with water, dry rations, ammunition of 200 rounds and 5 grenades each. As always, I had a TT pistol with the 2 magazines. On my waist belt 16 shots. However, if you have to use the pistol in such a raid, it means that things have taken a bad turn. At dawn we approached the farm and took up positions, according to the developed plan, in the rear of the Nazis. I, along with the old huntsman, opposite the house, holding the entrance to it at gunpoint. 3 snipers are 15 steps to the left, and 2 scouts are 15 steps to the right. Their target is the middle of the clearing where the field kitchen was. The wind picked up a little later and blew in gusts, increasing to 8-9 meters per second. Its direction was determined at an angle of 90 degrees to our position. I counted the correction for the scale of the side drum on the scope tube and showed the subordinates a sign with my fingers, so that they also adjusted the sights on their rifles. The Germans, very disciplined soldiers, gathered in the right place at the right time, in the right quantity. The kitchen arrived at 11:37, started distributing food at 11:50. Watching them through binoculars, I waited for them to surround the kitchen more tightly. I was aiming at a lanky, non-commissioned officer with 2 transverse stripes on his shoulder straps. That's a candidate for the officer rank. He stood out from the others, said something loudly. The privates obeyed him. Finally, the non-commissioned officer approached the cook, who was pouring soup with the ladle. His hat, in the uniform cloth cap, was exactly between the 3 lines in the eyepiece of my side. Perhaps the moment has come. The commander always shoot first, and this is the signal for the rest of the group, who are waiting for him with impatience and immediately begin to execute the order, given in such an unusual way. We opened a hurricane of fire from 3 points. Bullets flew into the grey-green crowd, began to shred it into pieces, knocking enemies to the ground. The Germans had no weapons and couldn't return fire immediately. In addition, many were killed in the first minutes of the attack. Among them a non-commissioned officer and the cook, who received a hot gift from my SVT rifle in the head. The artillery major jumped out of the house after hearing shots and screams. The bullet pierced the bridge of his nose. I certainly didn't waste my time studying this position. The old huntsman also shot, and quite accurately. He laid the orderly down. Through a clearing covered with the corpses of fascists, we rushed to the house. I pulled the major's documents out of the pocket of his tunic, cut off one shoulder strap, and the metal order over the night cross with a finger knife, took the officer's Walter pistol from the black leather holster on his belt. Meanwhile, the scouts broke into the building, firing machine guns. They wanted to take the staff papers. "Partisans!" There was a shout from there. The signalman corporal didn't have time to tell his superiors anything else, as he received a bullet in his chest. Everything that lay on the table in front of him, maps, orders, reports, a book of codes, went to the brave soldiers of the 54th Infantry Regiment, named after Stepan Razin. Running away from there, they also took with them a tightly packed satchel hanging on the wall, and took an MP-40 submachine gun from the chest of the sentry lying at the door. The group left the battlefield as quickly as attacked it. We ran through the forest for almost 1.5 kilometers. They went to the southeast along the hunting trails that Vartanov knew. He was leading us to the no man's land, but we shouldn't have crossed it during the day. The forester had a distant location in mind. A wooden hut, half embedded in the ground, not far from a spring. There we collapsed to the ground from extreme fatigue. Anastas, who didn't enter the house but watched our actions from the clearing, nobly volunteered to be a sentry. The rest lying down and fell asleep in an unbroken soldier's sleep. 3 hours later, it was like an alarm clock rang for me. I opened my eyes. Something has changed in the forest. The wind died down, it got very cold. Vartanov, together with Fyodor Sidych, hosted the spring. They dug a hole in the ground and built a small fire there. Its smoke mixed with fog and therefore was not dangerous for the group. Over the fire hung a fairly large pot, not ours, but borrowed from the hut. The water was boiling. On a flat stone the soldiers placed mugs, flasks, bread cut into thick slices, briquettes of pea soup puree food concentrate, which were going to be dissolved in boiling water. Fyodor, with a smile, showed me a German satchel, deftly removed by scouts from the wall in the room of the house in the confusion. The trophy came in very handy, because it contained products that were completely inaccessible to ordinary defenders of Sevastopol. I gave permission to use them now. It was probably the major's ration. Cans of sardines in oil, several bars of chocolate, packs of biscuits, a stick of smoked sausage wrapped in foil, a half-liter flask of cognac. In anticipation of the feast, the scouts happily rubbed their hands. The raid on the enemy headquarters now seemed to them very successful. I, in their opinion, had a direct relationship to this good fortune, and the fighters respectfully talked to me. While our lunch was being prepared, I took care of my own trophies. First of all, I carefully examined the Walter pistol. The weapon of this system was in my hands for the first time. Walter P38, of course, was one of the best products of the German military industry. During the Second World War, it was compact, easy to handle and maintain, suitable for a variety of tasks. The gun was distinguished by the presence of a reliable safety lock. In addition, he acted with a soft pull on the trigger. We managed to make out something in the documents of the fascist officer. For example, his name, surname, date of birth, places of battles where the major participated. The battle path, quite successful, ran through the territory of Czechoslovakia, France, Poland. A beautiful blonde woman hugging two teenage boys, looking straight into the camera lens and smiled. On the back of the card there were clear letters, Mein Herz, mit Liebe Anna. Her letter, long enough, was lying here. I couldn't read it, I just saw that the major wrote his wife an answer, but he didn't have time to send it. Yes, my dear Baron Clement Karl Ludwig von Stangl, this is not France for you. Russians don't surrender their main cities without a fight, so you shouldn't have come here with the tanks and guns. I thought and hid the enemy's paper in my field bag. Dear friends, that's all for today. It was Tim and the Eastern Front channel. I wish you peace and health. See you.